Hi everybody, I'm going to be reading from the book The Ideal Made Real. So I'm going to record it here. Start recording my reading. The purpose of this work is to present practical methods through, well, first of all, I might as well just say who. Christian Larson. Alright, I'm just going to begin. The purpose of this work is to present practical methods through which anyone, the beginner in particular, may realize his ideals, cause his cherished dreams to come true, and cause the visions of the soul to become tangible realities in everyday life. The best minds now believe that the ideal can be made real, that every lofty idea can be applied in practical living, and that all that is beautiful on the heights of existence can be made permanent expressions in personal existence. And so popular is this belief becoming that it is rapidly permeating the entire thought of the world. Accordingly, the demand for instructive knowledge on this subject that is simple as well as scientific is becoming almost universal. This book has been written to supply that demand. However, it does not claim to be complete, nor could any work on the ideal made real possibly be complete, because the ideal world is limitless and the process of making real the ideal is endless. To know how to begin is the principal secret, and he who has learned this secret may go further and further, forever and forever, until he reaches the most sublime heights that endless existence has in store. In store for him, in store for the one who does that. No attempt has been made to formulate the ideas, methods, and principles presented into a definite system. In fact, the tendency to form a new system of thinking or a new philosophy of life has been purposely avoided. Closely defined systems invariably become obstacles to advancement, and we are not concerned with the new philosophies of life. Our purpose is the living of the greater and greater life, and in such a life all philosophies must constantly change. In preparing the following pages, the object has been to take the beginner out of the limitations of the old and into the boundless of the new. To emphasize the fact that the possibilities that are latent in the human mind are nothing less than marvelous, and that the way to turn possibilities to practical use is sufficiently simple for anyone to understand. But no method has been presented that will not tend to suggest new and better methods as are required for further advancement. The best ideas are those that inspire new ideas, better ideas, greater ideas. The most perfect science of life is that science that gives each individual the power to create and recreate his own science as he ascends in the scale of life. Great souls are developed only where minds are left free to employ the best known methods according to their own understanding and insight. And it is only as the soul grows greater and greater that the ideal can be made real. It is the individuality and originality that give each person the power to make his own life as he may wish it to be. But those two important factors do not flourish in definite systems. There is no progress where the soul is placed in the hands of a method. True and continuous progress can be promoted only where all ideas, all methods, and all principles are placed in the hands of the soul. We have selected the best ideas and the best methods known for making the ideal real, and through this work we will place them in your hands. We do not ask that you follow these methods, we simply ask you to use them. You will then find them all to be practical. You will find that every one will work and produce the results you desire. You will then not only make real the ideal in your present sphere of life, but you will also develop within yourself the greater life, the power of which has no limit, the joy of which has no end. Chapter 1. The Ideal Made Real. To have ideals is not only simple but natural. It is just as natural for the mind to enter the ideal as to live. In fact, the ideal is an inseparable part of life, but to make the ideal real in every part of life is a problem, the solution of which appears to be anything but simple. The dream of the fair, the high, the beautiful, the perfect, the sublime, that everyone can do, but everyone has not learned how is something everyone can do, but not everyone has learned how to make his dreams come true, nor realize in the practical world what he has discerned in the transcendental world. The greatest philosophers and thinkers in history, with but few exceptions, have failed to apply their lofty ideals in practical living, not because they did not wish to, but because they had not discovered the scientific relationship existing between the ideal world and the real world. The greatest thinker of the past century confessed that he did not know how to use in everyday life the remarkable laws and principles that he had discovered in the ideal. He knew, however, that those laws and principles could be applied, and that the ideal could be made real, and he stated that he positively knew that others would discover the law of realization and that methods would be found in the near future through which any ideal could be made real in practical life, and his prophecy has come true. To understand the scientific relationship that exists between the real and the ideal, the mind must have both the power of interior insight and the power of scientific analysis, as well as the power of practical application. But we do not find, as a rule, the prophet and the scientist in the same man. The man who has visions and the man who can do things do not usually dwell in the same personality. Nevertheless, this is necessary, and every person can develop both the prophet and the scientist in himself. He can develop the power to see the ideal, and also the power to make the ideal real. The large mind, the broad mind, the deep mind, the lofty mind, the properly developed mind can see both the outer and the inner side of things. Such a mind can see the ideal on high and at the same time understand how to make real, tangible, and practical what he has seen. The seeming gulf between the ideal and the real, between the soul's vision and the power of practical action, is being bridged in thousands of minds today, and it is these minds who are gaining the power to make themselves and their own world as beautiful as the visions of the prophet. But the ideal life and the world beautiful are not for the few only. Everybody should learn how to find the path that leads from the imperfections of present conditions to the world of ideal conditions, the world of which we have all so frequently dreamed of. The problem is what beginners are to do with the beautiful thoughts and the tempting promises that are being scattered so widely at the present time. The average mind feels that the idealism of modern metaphysics has a substantial basis. He feels intuitively that it is true, and he discerns through the perceptions of his own soul that all these things that are claimed for applied metaphysics are possible. He inwardly knows that whatever the idealist declares can be done will be done. But the problem is how. The demand for simple methods is one of the greatest demands at the present time. The demand for simple methods for this is one of the greatest demands at the present time. Methods that everyone can learn and that will enable any aspiring soul to begin at once to realize his ideals. I wonder what they're going to say now. Such methods, however, are easily formulated and will be found in abundance on the following pages. These methods are based on eternal laws. They are as simple as the multiplication table and will produce results with the same unerring precision. Any person with a reasonable amount of intelligence can apply them, and those who have an abundance of perseverance can, through these methods, make real practically all the ideals they may have at the present time. Those who are more highly developed will find in these methods the secret through which their attainments and achievements will constantly verge on the borderland of the marvelous. In fact, when the simple law that unites the ideal and the real is understood and applied, it matters not how lofty our minds and our visions may be, we can make them all come true. To proceed, the principal obstacle must be removed, and this obstacle is the tendency to lose faith whenever we fail to make the real ideal, the very moment we expect to do so. This tendency is present to some degree in nearly every mind that is working for greater things, and it postpones the day of realization whenever it is permitted to exercise its power of retrogression. I'll repeat that. This tendency is present to some degree in nearly every mind. I think I'll start the whole paragraph. That seems to be one of the crux of it. That seems to be the crux of it. To proceed, the principal obstacle must be removed, and this obstacle is the tendency to lose faith whenever we fail to make real the ideal, the very moment we expect to do so. This tendency is present to some degree in nearly every mind that is working for greater things, and it postpones the day of realization whenever it is permitted to exercise its power of retrogression. Many a person has fallen into chronic despondency after having had a glimpse of the ideal, because it was so very beautiful and so very desirable. In fact, the only one thing that could satisfy, and yet seemingly so far away and so impossible, and yet it's so the one thing that could be that could so satisfy, and yet so seemingly far away and so impossible to reach. But here is a place where we must exercise extraordinary faith. We must never recognize the gulf that seems to exist between our present state and the state we desire to reach. On the other hand, we must continue the conviction that the gulf is only seeming, and that we positively shall reach the ideal that appears in the splendors of what seems to be a distant future, although what actually is very near at hand. Those who have more faith and more determination do not, as a rule, fall down when they meet this seeming gulf. They inwardly know that every ideal will sometime be realized. It could not be otherwise, because what we see in the distance is invariably something that lies in the pathway of our own eternal progress. And if we continue to move forward, we must inevitably reach it. We must inevitably reach it. But even to these, the ideal does at times appear to be very, very far away, and the time of waiting seems very long. They are frequently on the verge of giving up, and fears arise at intervals that many unpleasant experiences may, after all, be met before the great day of the realization is gained. However, we cannot afford to entertain such fears for a moment, nor to think that anything unpleasant can transpire during the period of transition. That is, the passing from the imperfections of the present conditions to the joys and delights of an ideal life. And I think here he's talking about, this is part of basically the idea that everything's part of a eternal process that the soul, I guess, continues for, like, into other lifetimes, I guess. I guess it seems like this might be related to that. I'll continue reading, though. We must remember that fear and despondency invariably retard our progress, no matter what our object in view may be, and that discouragement is very liable to cause a break in the engine that is to take our train to the fair city we so long have desired to reach. For so long have desired to reach. The time of waiting may seem long during such moments as come when the mind is down, but so long as the mind is on the heights, the waiting time disappears, and the pleasure of pursuit comes to take its place. So the time of waiting is down. The time of waiting may seem long during such moments as come when the mind is down, but so long as the mind is on the heights, the waiting time disappears. The pleasure of pursuit comes to take its place. So kind of like the journey is the adventure and stuff like that. In this connection, we should remember that the more frequently we permit the mind to fall down into fears and doubts, the longer we shall have to wait for the realization of the ideal. And the more we live in the upper story of life, the sooner we shall reach the goal in view. There are many who give up temporarily all efforts toward reaching their ideals, thinking it is impossible and that nothing is gained by trying. But such minds should realize that they are simply making their future progress more difficult by retarding their present progress. Such minds should realize the great fact that every ideal can be made real, because nothing is impossible. To reach any desired goal, the doing of certain things is necessary. But if those things are not done now, they will have to be done later. Besides, when we give up the present, we always make the obstacles in our way much greater than they were before. Those things that are necessary to promote our progress become more difficult to do the longer we remain in what may be termed the giving up attitude mode, and the reason why is found in the fact that the mind that gives up becomes smaller and smaller. It loses ability, capacity, and power, and becomes less and less competent to cope with the problems at hand. Whenever we give up, we invariably fall down into a smaller mental state. When we cease to move forward, we begin to move backward. We retard progression only when we cease to promote progression. We retard progression only when we cease to promote progression. On the other hand, so long as we continue to pursue the ideal, we ascend into a larger and larger mental state. On the other hand, so long as we continue to pursue the ideal, we ascend into larger and larger mental states, and thus increase our power to make real the ideals that are before us. The belief that it is impossible to make real, the belief that it is impossible to make real, the ideal, has no foundation whatever in truth. It is simply an illusion produced by fear, and has no place in the exact science of life. When you discern an ideal, you discover something that lies in your own onward path. When you discern an ideal, you discover something that lies in your own onward path. Move forward and you simply cannot fail to reach it. But when you are to reach the coveted goal depends on how rapidly you are moving now. Knowing this, and knowing that fear, doubt, discouragement, and indifference invariably retard this forward movement, we shall find it most profitable to remove those mental states absolutely. The true attitude is the attitude of positive conviction. That is, to live in the strong conviction that whatever we see before us in the ideal will positively be realized, sooner or later, if we only move forward, and we can make it sooner if we will move forward steadily, surely, and rapidly during every moment of the great eternal now. To move forward steadily during the great eternal now is to realize now as much of the ideal as we care to appropriate now. No waiting, therefore, is necessary for it. To begin to move forward is to begin to make the real the ideal, and we will realize in the now as much of the ideal as is necessary to make the now full and complete. To move forward steadily during the great eternal now is to eternally become more than you are. To become more than you are is to make yourself more and more like your ideal. And here is the great secret, because the principle is that you will realize your ideal when you become exactly like your ideal, and that you will realize as much of your ideal now as you develop in yourself now. The majority, however, feel that they can never become as perfect as their ideal. Others, however, think that they can, and that they will some time, but that it requires ages, and they dwell constantly upon the unpleasant belief that they may in the meantime have to pass through years and years of ordinary and undesirable experience. But they are mistaken, and besides, they are retarding their own progress every moment by entertaining such thoughts. If all the time and all the energy that is wasted in longing and longing, yearning and yearning, were employed in scientific, practical self-development, the average person would in a short time become as perfect as his ideal. He would thus realize his ideal, because we attract from the without what corresponds without on the outside, because we attract from the without, the outside, what corresponds exactly to what is our own within. When we attain the ideal and the beautiful in our own natures, we shall meet the ideal and beautiful wherever we may go in the world. When we attain the ideal and beautiful in our own natures, we shall meet the ideal and the beautiful wherever we may go in the world, and we will find the same things in the real that we dreamed of in the ideal. When we see an ideal, we usually begin to long for it and hope that something remarkable may happen so as to bring it into our possession. And we thus continue to long and yearn and wait for periods of despondency intervening. We simply use up time and energy to no avail. When we see an ideal, the proper course to pursue is to begin at once to develop that ideal in our own nature. We should never stop to wait and see whether it is coming true or not. We should never stop to figure out how much time it may require to reach our goal. The secret is, begin now to be like your ideals, and at the proper time that ideal will be made real. The very moment you begin to rebuild yourself like the exact likeness of your ideal, you will begin to realize your ideal. Because we invariably gain possession of that of which we become conscious, and to begin to develop the ideal in ourselves is to begin to become conscious of the ideal. To give thought to time is to stop and measure time in consciousness. To give thought to time itself is to stop and measure time in consciousness, and every stop in consciousness means retarded progress. Real progress is eternal. It is a forward movement that is continuous now, and in the realization of such a progress, no thought is ever given to time. To live in the life of eternal progress is to gain ground every moment. It means the perpetual increase of everything that has value, greatness, and worth, and the mind that lives in such a life cannot possibly be discouraged or dissatisfied. Such a mind will not only live in the perpetual increase of everything that the heart can wish for, but will also realize perpetually the greatest joy of all joys, the joy of going on. The discouraged mind is the mind that lives in the emptiness of life, But there can be no emptiness in that life that lives in the perpetual increase of all that is good and beautiful and ideal. The only time that seems long is the time that is not well employed in continuous attainment, and the only waiting time that seems the hardest time of all is the time that is not fully consecrated to the highest purpose you have in view. When we understand that we all may have different ideals, we will find that we have an undeveloped correspondence in ourselves to every ideal that we may discern. When we understand that we all may have different ideals, we will find that we have an undeveloped correspondence in ourselves to every ideal that we may discern. And if we proceed to develop these corresponding parts, there will be some ideals realized every day. Today we may succeed in making real an ideal that we first discovered a year ago. Tomorrow we may reach a goal toward which we have been moving for years, and in a few days we may realize ideals that we have had in view during periods of time varying from a few weeks to several years. And if we are applying the principles that underlie the process of making real the ideal, we may at any time realize ideals of which we have dreamed for a lifetime. Consequently, when we approach this subject properly, we shall daily come into possession of something that is our own. All the beautiful things of which we have dreamed will be coming into our world, and there will be new arrivals every day of it. Every day. This is the life of the real idealist, and we cannot picture a life that is more complete and more satisfying. But it is not only complete in the present, it is constantly growing larger and more desirable, thus giving us daily a higher degree of satisfaction and joy. When we discern an ideal that okay, so I think let's just keep on reading it. I mean, I'll probably do something where I'll actually analyze it more. I mean, it's quite a lot of it. I mean, it's at the same time it's not a lot of information. I mean, it's at the same time it's so vague as to like encompass incredible amount of information. So this is the life of the real idealist, and we cannot picture a life that is more complete and more satisfying. But it's not only complete in the present, it is constantly growing larger and more desirable, thus giving us daily a higher degree of satisfaction and joy. When we discern an ideal, that ideal has come within the circle of our own capacity for development, and the power to develop that ideal in ourselves is therefore at hand. The mind never discerns those ideals that are beyond the possibility of present development. Thus we realize that when an ideal is discerned, it is proof positive that we have the power to make it real now. Those who have not found their ideals in any shape or form whatever have simply neglected to make their own ideal nature strong, positive, and pronounced. To live in negative idealism is to continue to dream on without seeing a single dream come true. But when the ideals we discern in our own natures become strong, positive working forces, our dreams will soon come true. Our ideals will be realized one after the other until life becomes what it is intended to be, a perpetual ascension into all that is rich, beautiful, and sublime. Whether we speak of environments, attainments, achievements, possessions, circumstances, opportunities, friends, companions, or the scores of things that belong in our world, the law is the same. We receive an ideal only when we become just like that ideal. If we seek better friends, we shall surely find them and retain them. If we develop higher and higher degrees of friendship, if we seek better friends, we shall surely find them and retain them. If we develop higher and higher degrees of friendship, we wish to associate with refined people, we must become more refined in our actions, thought, and speech. If we wish to reach our ideals in the world of achievement, we must develop greater ability, capacity, and power. If we desire better environments, we must not only learn to appreciate the beautiful, but we must also develop the power to produce those things that have true quality, high worth, and real superiority. The great secret is to become more useful in the world. That is, useful in the largest and highest sense of that term. He who gives his best to the world will receive the best in return. The world needs able men and women, people who can do things that are thoroughly worthwhile, people who can think great thoughts and can transform such thoughts into great deeds. And to secure such men and women, the world will give anything that it may hold in its possession. To make real the ideal, proceed to develop greatness, superiority, and high worth in yourself. Train the mind to dwell constantly upon the borderland of the highest ideals that you can possibly picture. Do not simply yearn for what you can see, and do not covet what has not yet become your own, Proceed to remake yourself into the likeness of that ideal, and it will become your own. To proceed with the great development, the whole of life must be changed to conform with the exact science of life, that is, the science that is based upon the physical and metaphysical united as the one expression of all that is great and sublime in the soul. The new way of thinking about things, viewing things, and doing things must be adopted in full, and this new way is based upon the principle that the ideal actually is real, and therefore should be approached not as a future possibility, but as a present actuality. Think of the ideal as if it were real, and you will find it to be real. Meet all things as if they contained within them the ideal, and you will find that all things will present their ideals to you, not simply as mere pictures, but as realities. View the whole of life from the heights of existence, then you will see things as they are and deal with things accordingly. You will see that side of the whole existence that may be termed the better side, and in consequence you will grow into the likeness of that better side. When you grow into the likeness of the better side of all things, you will attract the better side of all things, and the ideal of everything in the world will be made real in your world. Chapter 2. How to begin. The prime essentials. How to begin. The prime essentials. To formulate rules in detail that will apply to each individual case is neither possible nor necessary. All have not the same present needs nor the same previous training. But there are certain general principles that apply to all, and these, if followed... Okay, I'm going to stop this in a video, and I'm going to do... Actually, I'm going to do Chapter 2 in another video. Alright, I'm going to put Chapter 2 in a different video. And